Story 1. Background. I work in a big international company. In store as a part of the warehouse operative. Basically, we do everything for everyone. The manager of the warehouse team is a real jerk. She employed her son full-time when he turned 18 and gave him his own pick at what hours he would like. So now he has become her whipping boy when she is around. Never. But when she is not, he does as he likes. He orders people around, shouts at people, and just sits and does nothing at all. The actual story. So the other day, after feeling bad all day, I told him that if I feel this bad, I will not be coming in tomorrow, and I will call his mom and tell her. So I carry on working the rest of the shift. I think he's cool. I don't know why everyone slags him off. We are locking up, and he asks me if I smoked grass. I said, oh yeah, I'm going to smoke some when I get home. We carry on talking, and he admits that he smokes too. Shift ends. I called in sick the following day because I felt really bad. So when I returned to work 2 days later, I found out he told his mom that I couldn't be arsed to work, and I was going to lie to get the day off. Manager pulls me aside, bollocks me. He spreads around work that I lied to get the day off. The same day, the manager bollocks me. I also get a random locker search. I have some items in my bag that I bought earlier in store. They didn't want to see the receipt. Instead, they sniffed through my bag, saying they were looking for something in particular, obviously the grass. So by now, I know that he snitched on me to his mom twice. I then decided I was going to have some fun with it. Revenge. So then I asked him if he wanted to buy some cocaine something. He said he takes all the time from me. I will be bringing quite a lot in tomorrow at work so he can buy. I hinted that I would have about half a kilo lol. So when I get to work, I get a call from the manager to meet me in the locker room. By the time I get in there, 3 private security officers are following me from the staff room. Then I go into the locker room. There are a further 8 officers and 1 drug sniffer dog. I get made to open my locker and empty my bag. During this time, the manager and her son are standing in the locker room with me smirking. Also, the regional manager is in store, so he is there too. No drugs in my bag. Store gets fined a lot of money for wasting time. His mom gets demoted for calling in the search. He gets the sack and tries to fight me. He gets arrested. He gets 7 months in prison. A nice added bonus to my last pay packet. I leave the company next week to go to university. We are even. Basically, I was coming into work one day, and he was waiting for me in the staff area. I thought nothing of it and just got changed. When I was getting changed, coincidentally, the security guard was just starting his shift too. So then when the guy saw me, I was with a security guard. He walked up to me and basically socked me in the back of the head whilst I was walking away. Cheap shot. But it was all on camera and the security guard was a witness to it all. His mom got a new job after this. Story 2. Setting the stage. Before I, a 25-year-old female, transferred to a university for college. I was at a state college for my While I was there, I did several plays with a director who we will call Dr. D. She was strict but very effective and super sweet when we were not rehearsing. When COVID hit, I had to stop my degree and move back home. A few months into it, I started a job on the college campus, and my mother was taking classes. She got involved with the plays with Dr. D. I also want to note that the college allows alumni and community members to participate in the plays. Act 1, Scene 1. Dr. D was doing a play, and my mother had a main role. I decided to jump in and help with costumes. Everyone in the cast was very nice, except for one enter Chad. Chad was in his late 60s, early 70s. He had decided to pursue acting and was taking drama classes with Dr. D. He was a nightmare. He argued with Dr. D about anything under the sun. If Dr. D wanted him to give a line a certain way, he would argue back or blame the person he was with for giving their line the incorrect way. And heaven forbid you forgot your line or said the wrong line. He also snapped at me a few times over costumes. If it wasn't for Dr. D, I would have made me and my mother drop out, but we stayed and were grateful when the play was over and we wouldn't have to see him again. Or so we thought. Act 1, Scene 2. A few months later, I was working in my chosen field, having finished my degree, and my mother was still active on campus. She was helping in Dr. D's new play and was in charge of costumes. However, Chad was the assistant director. According to Dr. D, no one else wanted to do it, and she needed the help. My mother would come home each week with horror stories of Chad. He would yell at the actors when Dr. D wasn't around, argue with Dr. D about blocking, line delivery, etc. At the same time, the main girl was never at rehearsal, and as the performance drew nearer, Dr. D panicked. Less than a week before the performance, she handed me a script and asked me to take over lead. I don't know how the girl took it. She hadn't been to rehearsal in weeks, and I never met her after. As I said, I had worked with Dr. D for at this point years, and had done several plays with her, so I jumped in. How I managed to memorize and perform a 2-act play seamlessly, I have no idea, and yes, I am bragging, because I am extremely proud of myself for it, and I know I will never be able to do that again. At this point, I got to see Chad in action. Act 2, Scene 2. He constantly yelled and made snide comments. I only had a weekend and 2 days to practice, so the cast met very often. He would take over the line reading, saying he did it better, and that we needed to keep up with him. The day before, we had a full dress rehearsal on the stage, and the whole time he was yelling backstage at us over props we wouldn't use till Act 2, to the point that Dr. D had to stop rehearsal, walk backstage, and yell at him to shut up. When we were cleaning up, Dr. D told me to set some of the clothing on stage, which he hated and yelled at me for, but I stood my ground because Dr. D wanted it, and she was in charge. He told my mother I was a disrespectful brat. My mother told him I was not. Act 2, Scene 3. The night of the play, we had 2 performances. Between the first and second show, my mother was working on our hairs in the ladies' dressing room when he stormed in screaming. "You need to be on stage, what are you doing?" No, he was not allowed in the dressing room. He was supposed to call from the door, "Places 5, which means be in your place in 5 minutes. I jumped up and hustled towards the stage while the girls yelled at him to get out. When I got backstage where my blouse was, I was in a tank top, and the blouse stayed backstage. I ran into Dr. D, who joked with me and made her way to the audience. My mother joined me, and as we were walking toward the stage entrance, she was setting up my mic pack. I could see Chad at the same entrance cursing up a storm. I could hear bits and pieces, and then heard my name. I was about to pass him when I heard him say, "Op is so disrespectful, just do your job." I stopped in front of him and said, "Why are you talking bad about me? I'm about to go on stage." He turned and screamed, "Stay out of it." As I was passing, I said, "Just stop talking about me and focus." At this point, I was just past him, and he turned and socked me in the back of my shoulder. I almost dropped to the floor. It was that hard. I straightened and turned, and in the millisecond I had to decide, do I beat this man out or yell? I chose to yell because my mother was between us. "You can't hit people, you just hit me." "I'll do it again, stay out of it." At this point, he started charging me when my mother rammed him into the wall, got in his face, and said, "Don't you dare touch my daughter." At this point, he snapped out of it and became remorseful. He kept going, "Oh, I'm so sorry, hit me instead," over and over again. All this happened when the overhead announcements for cell phones and flash photography were going off, so no one in the audience heard. We had been surrounded by the other actors and stagehands who witnessed this happen. One of the actresses grabbed my hands and helped me get on stage. I have little to no memory of that second performance. According to the stagehands and the audience, I did amazing. I have no memory, but apparently I didn't miss a line, emotion, or blocking. While I was on stage for 2 acts, and I was almost never off, this is what happened. One of the actresses told a stagehand to get Dr. D and threatened Chad with security if he did not leave. He walked off and Dr. D met him. She forced him to leave and shoot him out. After the play, I was told if I wanted to go to campus security, I could. It was my choice. It was 11 p.m. and campus security had already gone home. Epilogue. The next morning I went and reported Chad to the campus police. I was able to give a list of witnesses who confirmed my story. Several things were revealed when they spoke to witnesses. He was body-shaming one of the actresses, telling her she needed to trim up for the role and was too bulk. He had been touching one of the actors. The poor kid was 18 and didn't know if it was a normal theater thing. He didn't know who to talk to, and it came out to the campus police. He later told us what had happened. The stagehands only worked with us for 3 days, and the whole time he bullied and berated them. He would scream in their face for the smallest stuff. Most of the stagehands were 18, 19-year-olds who were there to volunteer or for extra credit in their drama class. This next part is karma and a bit of revenge. He was expelled from the school and banned from attending any more school-related functions. As I said, the community and alumni were allowed to attend certain events. Dr. D and I took it one step further. She reached out to all her theater contacts, and he is banned from performing, volunteering, or assisting in anything theater-related anywhere near where we live and some. That way history cannot repeat itself. Story 3. Alright, so I'm sure most of us have been there, late teens, early 20s, and sowing those oats, as the boomers called it. A particularly fine-looking dance partner comes along, and all of a sudden you go from doing the waltz with half the town to looking like Tom when he sees the female cat in Tom and Jerry. This wildly attractive and intelligent person has you hook, line, and sinker, and you're smitten completely. You change paths and start talking about how you're going to start spending weekends at Home Depot and on DIY projects, and your home has furniture for the first time in your life since leaving the nest. Well, here is where this fabulous fairy tale takes a hard left turn right into oncoming traffic. The apple of our eye, you see, has hatched a plan that is, if I have a baby, he is stuck with me, and thus a family is born. But wait, this is when everything goes to hell and you're now single again. Seeing the kid you were truly tricked into having every other weekend and trying to foster the best relationship imaginable. Eventually it becomes every other weekend, and you spend the time with your little guy, grinding at work, playing your odds, and everything's coming up Millhouse. 15 years pass, and you've managed to go from a pizza delivery boy who also bartends a few nights a week to a man who owns 3 very successful businesses as well as other assets. Life is good. Another dance partner has come along and shown you the proper moves for a long-lasting duet. This, friends, brings us to the present day, as our best mistake in life has turned 17, and you couldn't be more proud of that not-so-little sucker, as he has grown into such an incredible youngin'. You couldn't have dreamt of a better relationship or son. Your son now has a brother that is 14 months younger than him. Your old dancing partner hasn't fared so well in such an open capitalist market and is still living in a lower middle-class lifestyle. The shining star of your life has spent every weekend and any night he could after school since he was 12 restoring his first car from just a shell in a junkyard, and it's finally time to head on down to the DMV for tags, title, and a call to Dad's insurance. It's the best day of both of your lives as you pull back into the shop so he can bring the fruits of his labor home with him and never ride the bus to school again. But there is a nasty storm on the horizon. Now we're up to our entitled kid and our entitled ex's role in this story. We pull into the driveway, the prodigal son in his dreamboat of a 1993 Mazda RX-7. The engine quickly braps away as the 2.0L3 rotor is running better than Usain Bolt after hearing, "Release the cheetahs." Dad follows into the driveway of ex's house in his 2005 Mitsubishi Lancer Evo. Mr. Cars are parked, and we walk for the door, play punching each other in the arm as we laugh and chat from pure excitement. As Dad's foot hits the porch, the front door bursts open, and entitled kid flies out the door, shoulder-checking his brother as he runs toward the shiny red car in the driveway. Our entitled ex of the story, whose entitled kid and the chosen son's mother, immediately walks out and looks at the 2 cars in the driveway, and you can tell by the look on her face something must smell horrible within the walls of your long-forgotten castle. Dialogue ensues. Protagonist: Mom. Remember the car I told you Dad and I have been building forever? It's finally done, and we got tags on it, and you don't ever have to worry about driving me anywhere now. Entitled X, looking directly at our humble knight: why would you give him this car? Is it nicer than mine? How much did it cost? You better have another one for entitled kid. Entitled Kid, awesome, when will mine be here? Me, whoa wait. I have one child. He chose this car when he was 11, and we spent almost 2 years finding one to restore. Protagonist spent almost all of his free time building this car with his bare hands, while I helped and guided him. Entitled Kid was even invited to come hang out at the shop with his brother any time if he wanted to, but has never once came. Entitled Kid, can I get a GTR? I really like that silver one from Fast and Furious. Entitled X, you know, I'm still driving the Maita you bought me in 2005. I need a new car too. Protagonist, give me your keys. You're going to be driving my car while I take the new one. Protagonist, the heck you are. Me and Entitled X simultaneously say. Me, watch your mouth please. Entitled X, how dare you speak to me that way? Now you'll be driving nothing. Entitled Kid, I'll take the Maita until Whipsalo gets my GTR if Protagonist isn't going to be driving it. Me, Protagonist's car legally belongs to me and is only insured for him or I to drive it. No one will drive Protagonist's car unless it is him or I. No one. Understand? Entitled X, well, you better take me to local BMW dealer and get me at least a used 4 Series if you think I'm letting Protagonist drive this car. Protagonist, finally collecting his thoughts. Mom, Dad isn't Entitled Kid's dad. He's not your husband, and I can't remember a time when he was. That's my car I built with my own hands, tearing up at this point, and I'll just sell it before Dad buys you a new car. Me, proud, concerned, and all around befuddled from these events. Protagonist, go pack a bag or 2 of all your important stuff. You can drive to school from my house now, so it's no big deal. Entitled X screamed an absolute boatload of insults, curse words, and demands as we got into our cars, and has been texting me non-stop ever since. This happened on Sunday. Entitled Kid showed up at my shop last night and wanted to learn the ropes. I had to inform Entitled Kid that I wasn't going to be buying him a car, but if he wanted to learn mechanics, I'd be happy to teach him. And when he did get a car, I'm sure both I and his brother would help him do any modifications he'd like to it, and I'd also get him parts at wholesale price 35 to 50% off. Typically Entitled Kid immediately screamed, "This is nonsense," kicked in the door of a 2015 Mustang we had in for a cam job, denting it all to hell and running out of my shop. I've sent an officer to formally trespass Entitled Kid from my business, and filed a police report on Entitled X to make the phone call sticks end. I decided to tell this story with a bit of jest, as if I didn't I'd have dropped an F-bomb every 4th word while typing this. If I'm in some bizarro world where I'm the entitled douche here, feel free to roast me. I'll end by saying my ex had seen our son's car about a week after we fished it out of the junkyard, and it literally looked like that scene in the first Fast and the Furious with the Supra on the back of the tow truck. Story 4. January. Submit plans to Homeowner Association Design Committee for a swimming pool. Given the OK and told the project looks beautiful. Lead developer actually contacts the pool builder for a pool of his own. March. Landscaper comes to me asking if my neighbors can have some limestone steps built alongside their house, but would come into my property by about 4 feet. Knowing that I'm building a pool and landscaping with it, as well as a fence, I say no. He comes back a bit later saying they would like to buy a sliver of my land so they can have their steps. I say no again, though I considered giving them a purposely ridiculous price. They ask him to ask me to sell the land a few more times, until I finally tell him they need to approach me directly, instead of sending a poor landscape salesman to negotiate. Quick backstory on the neighbors. He's on our state's Board of Regents, and is the president of the company my father worked for 35 years. My dad was a sales rep and used to be on commission. One year, the sales team knocked it out of the park, many of them taking home 6 figures. The next year, they were all put on salary. On one occasion, my dad asked for a raise, and my neighbor denied him, saying, "We've looked at your situation and decided you make enough for a family of your size in this area." Meanwhile, my neighbor lives in a gigantic mansion. Fast forward to now, I live in one of the nicest neighborhoods in my town. have worked super hard to get where I am, and wasn't born with a silver spoon. When my neighbors moved in, they have reminded me several times that they're downsizing, whatever. They love their smaller lot because it's easier to maintain. They know who my dad is, but I'm not sure if they know we aren't exactly too fond of them for trying to keep their workforce from becoming as successful as they could. Basically, I'm not giving these people anything. August. Pool gets completed and I have the fence built. That very evening, I can see the neighbors in their sunroom looking at my yard, and their body language is not positive. A couple days later, one of the contractors working on the pool tells me he thinks the neighbors aren't happy with my fence. Someone pulled up in a truck and started taking pictures of it, etc. Of course they aren't. Their downsized house is so close to the edge of their lot. My fence doesn't give them a lot of room. The homeowner association requires 3 feet of clearance off the property line. The fence is so close to their house, I actually become concerned that it's on their property line. I order a survey, and it comes back saying I'm clear by 5.5 feet in the front and 10 feet in the back. Phew. Same night I get the survey results, the head of the homeowner association calls me and tells me the fence is on the property line and I have to move it. I say, actually, I was concerned it was less than 3 feet away, so I had a surveyor verify its position, and it's actually 5 and 10 feet away. He seems surprised, but also fairly skeptical, so I have the surveyor forward the results, and he emails me asking me to have them put stakes in the ground over the property pins so he can see for himself. As I was taking the trash out this morning, I was greeted by the surveyors. They asked me if I was having neighbor problems, and I quickly explained they thought the fence was on their property and was just as quickly reassured that I was good to go. Anyway, the neighborhood block party and homeowner association meeting are being hosted at the neighbor's house later this month, and I'm not sure whether I should show up and act like a smug jerk or just throw a pool party in my own yard at the same time. Story 5. Bit of backstory. So a fair number of years ago, when I was still dating my now ex-husband, X was living with some friends of ours. Very nice people who opened their home up to him because he chose to live a rather transient lifestyle and needed a place to stay. They had also welcomed in several teenagers in need who went to the same school as their kids, but had been kicked out of their parents' houses because of lifestyle differences. This was long enough ago that everyone involved is now an adult and no one suffered any permanent damage, but fair warning, I am an idiot, and I'm well aware. I'm also now old enough that I've mostly reached the I don't care about your expectations phase of my life. The story. My kid asked if we could go hang out at her friend's house after school, and I didn't have work, and I'd get to hang out with my friends and my boyfriend, so I was more than happy to agree. She had bought just under a dozen fundraiser chocolate bars, I forget the exact number, with her own money, and wanted to share one with her friends before the rest got divided up as gifts for the other people she wanted to give them to. Sweet kid, likes sharing. I asked my friend if we could put them in the fridge because it was super hot out and I didn't want them melting and spoiling her gifts, so my friend said to put them in their garage fridge because they'll be safe there. Okay, sure. Fast forward a few hours, and we are getting ready to leave and all but 2 of the chocolate bars are missing. Stolen. Presumably by at least one of the teenagers in the house, but I'm not the type to go accusing people without actual evidence. There wasn't any way to prove which teen had taken them, or if there was more than one culprit, but these were supposed to be mine and my kids' friends. You don't steal from friends, shouldn't steal at all, but definitely not from the people in your crew. My kid was understandably upset and felt betrayed, and I was livid that someone who claimed to be her friend stole from her, hurt her, lied to her, and then tried to blame someone else. Everyone was pointing fingers. I've already mentioned my idiotic nature, add vindictive to that. I'm also allergic to artificial sweeteners and X is a diabetic. So I did a little research and found which artificial sweetener has the most laxative effects, and then found which types of sugar-free candy chocolate had the highest content of said sweetener. I bought 5 bags, took the 2 grocery bags full of diabetic-friendly candy to X, and made sure that everyone in the house knew that these were X's candy because he can't have real sugar because of the diabetes, and asked everyone, very nicely, to not eat any of X's candy. And then I waited. All 5 bags were gone after 2 days. X had a couple pieces, and the rest were all stolen. Oh no, this was an entirely unanticipated outcome. Sarcasm. Out of the entire household of 4 adults and 6-7 teenagers, I had trouble keeping track of which one was which. Only the adults and 1 teen didn't end up suffering from massive amounts of diarrhea. Icing on the cake, the teens all shared the same single bathroom. Story 6. It's my first time using Reddit, so I apologize if the format isn't perfect. Recently, I was reminded of a story of malicious compliance I took part in as a child. For some context, I have a severe allergy to peanuts and tree nuts. If I eat or touch peanuts or nuts, I can go into anaphylactic shock, which means my throat closes up, and I could choke. I carry an epinephrine auto-injector with me at all times because of this. Additionally, the teacher in question seemed to dislike children. She was the type who would yell if a child got something wrong. To keep things anonymous, I'll call her Mrs. Indifferent and refer to myself as me. With that out of the way, here's the story. I was in 1st grade, and by that time, I understood the severity of my peanut and nut allergy. I always read labels, avoided home-cooked meals from others, and didn't eat anything unless I was sure it was safe. It was a day like any other. I was happily coloring on a piece of paper while waiting for my teacher. As I was finishing my drawing, Mrs. Indifferent brought out a fun activity worksheet that involved candy. If I recall correctly, the activity required counting or something related to math. As she passed out the worksheets and candy, I noticed she was handing out a popular chocolate-coated candy that I am allergic to. The interaction went something like this. Me. Mrs. Indifferent, I can't have these. I'm allergic. Mrs. Indifferent, these are the original ones. They don't have peanuts in them. Me. But my mom says I'm allergic to the original ones too. Mrs. Indifferent, they're fine. You can have them. To this day, I don't understand why a teacher would tell a child with allergies to eat something the child believes they're allergic to. Even though these candies don't contain peanuts or nuts directly, they're made on the same equipment as those that do. This exchange continued for a while, with her insisting they're fine and me explaining they're not. I think she genuinely believed I was just trying to annoy her. Mrs. Indifferent, if you don't start behaving, I'm going to call your mother, and you will be in big trouble. Younger me realized that my mom would likely just confirm what I was saying, so instead of trying to convince her, I smiled and said, "Okay, call her." I remember wondering why Mrs. Indifferent wouldn't just believe me. Looking back, it seems like she disliked being corrected, especially by a 1st grader. The teacher looked annoyed but smug, perhaps assuming that my mom would reprimand me for refusing to put myself at risk or have to use an emergency epinephrine injection followed by a hospital visit. I don't know the full conversation between my mom and Mrs. Indifferent because it happened so long ago, and my mom doesn't recall every detail. She does remember being extremely angry, though. My mom tore into her, and everyone in the class could hear her raised voice through the phone. For the first time, I saw Mrs. Indifferent actually look nervous. After my mom finished, Mrs. Indifferent called me to the corner of the room and handed me a bag of fruit-flavored candy, which she apparently had the entire time. Although I missed out on participating with the class, I was perfectly content completing my assignment while enjoying my packet of fruit candies, knowing my teacher was quietly seething at her desk, aware that a 7-year-old knew better than she did. Later, it was revealed that my mom had sent an email to the school's principal. Luckily for Mrs. Indifferent, this was the toned-down version. Following that, the teacher had to attend a refresher course on allergy management, which had already been presented to her at the start of the school year. I suppose the school was in dire need of staff, as she continued teaching there despite several incidents. While it would be satisfying to say I ate the candies and watched her career falter dramatically, I didn't. As a wise animated character once said, No thanks, I choose life. Story 7. I've been living in my apartment here in Germany for about 8 years. German tenant laws are really strong, which is great for renters like me. But my apartment company either didn't know this or thought I didn't. A year after I moved in, they sent me a letter that turned my life upside down. The letter reads something like this. Dear Sir, we are canceling your current rental contract. If you wish to continue renting this apartment, please sign this new contract with much higher rent or vacate the apartment within 30 days. When I read that, my heart sank. The city I live in has soaring rental prices, and it had already taken me forever to find an affordable long-term place here. I really thought I'd be forced to either sign this contract or lose my home. The idea of moving back to the United States crossed my mind. I'd finally found some stability, and here it was, all in jeopardy. I started looking into my options, feeling hopeless until a friend suggested something called the Mieterverein. It's a non-profit group that advocates for tenants' rights and provides legal help to members. Without thinking twice, I found one nearby and went straight to their office, hoping they could help. When I got there, I filled out some paperwork and waited for my turn to talk to the lawyer. She was a calm, older woman, the type who looked like she'd seen every tenant's rights case in the book. I showed her the letter and my current rental contract. She took her time reading through it, flipping pages without saying a word. I felt like each second was an hour. Finally, she looked at me, and with the most professional tone said something like, "You have nothing to worry about. This letter is nonsense." She must have noticed the relief in my eyes because she softened a bit and pointed to a line in the contract. She said, "Look here. No changes may be made to this contract unless both parties consent to the proposed changes. In plain words, as long as you don't sign the new contract, they can't touch your current one." I almost laughed in relief. All that stress, and it turned out they couldn't do a thing. The lawyer offered to write a letter to the company on my behalf, reminding them of this detail. She explained it'd be better coming from a legal office because companies usually think twice before arguing with a lawyer. I gladly agreed, and she sent it off. About a month passed, and I didn't hear a thing. Then, one day, another letter arrived from the apartment company. This time, it was a complete 180. They practically admitted defeat and tried to brush off their attempt by saying the previous letter was sent in error by an employee who is no longer with the company. Sure, right. That was too convenient, but I wasn't complaining. After that, I figured it was over. But no. A year later, like clockwork, I received another letter from the company saying the same thing, that they were ending my contract, and I needed to sign a new one or leave. I didn't even bother getting stressed. I just forwarded it straight to the Mieterverein, and once again, their lawyer sent a letter back telling the company to back off. And guess what? It didn't stop there. For the next 7 years, the company kept up this ritual. Every year, I'd get the same intimidating letter from them. I'd forward it to the Mieterverein, and they'd send the company a letter telling them off. It was like a routine at this point. I'd see that letter in my mailbox, roll my eyes, and think, here we go again. Finally, after the 8th year, the Mieterverein's lawyer seemed to get as fed up as I was. She sent them a final letter, a strongly worded one, telling them to stop sending these pointless notices or face some serious legal consequences. Since then, it's been quiet. No more letters, no more threats, just the peace of knowing I can stay in my apartment without dealing with empty threats every year.